Tonight's What Keeps You Up at Night is all about making yourself redundant. It's about making sure that your business can work without you. So I'm going to hand over to Louise Lee now, who will tell us exactly how to do that.
Hi there, Anne. Thank you. So as Anne said, it is about making yourself redundant. And for me, this started when I worked at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. We moved posts every 3 years. And so when we moved on, we had to create a Bible of systems and processes so the next person could move into the post and start working straight away. And when I moved to the private sector, I was so surprised that if one person goes on holiday, everything crumbles, nothing happens. And it got me realising that although working in some government organisations is incredibly restrictive, it can also be really empowering for small businesses, which is where mapping the processes comes in. And also working with small businesses, I've realised that understanding what you want to achieve really helps you when you're setting up your CRM or project management software, or in fact even just making choices about which ones are going to work for you. I don't know if you watched the little demo video that I created for this session where I went through booking an appointment. If you didn't, I'll just go through it again now. So if you were to sit down and think, I want to delegate all of my appointment bookings, then you need to work out what steps are involved. And it's ridiculous. You receive an inquiry and all you want to do is set up an appointment with them. But you've got to go through sending them choices of dates. If there's no response to that email, what happens next? And so you work through the process step by step by step until you get to something that looks like this. And at the end of it, they've attended the appointment, so you create the invoice, and that's it, job done. But what this doesn't take into account is when you're delegating this process to somebody, it doesn't take into account all of the ridiculous questions. Well, if there's no response to the email, what should I do? So you want to make it as easy as possible for someone to follow the process without ever having to come back to you. And this isn't just about creating teams, it's about if you're outsourcing to other people as well. And also to help keep you on track. I mean, you will know the responses to a lot of this, but if you do want to grow your business at all, then you do need to have these in place. I use the monkey metaphor when it comes to tasks. So you need to decide who owns the monkey, i.e. who owns the task, and when it needs to be fed. Because if a team has a monkey to look after and no one's responsible for the monkey will die. So every monkey or every task must have an owner, and every owner needs to know the feeding schedule. Tasks or monkeys can change owners as necessary or as often as you need to, but they must have an owner. So now you know why I've got monkeys in here. So if we go back to looking at the booking an appointment, we need to say that the next action is email 3 appointment choices to the inquirer. When does the monkey next need feeding? It needs feeding in 3 days. So we haven't just got an if this, then that. We've also got a follow-up due date. If there is no response to that first email, then the next action is send a follow-up email. When does that monkey need feeding? That needs feeding in 3 days. And so you go through the if this then that process for every tiny little action that needs to take place. But you also need to know who owns the monkey. So far we've looked at just emailing appointment choices to somebody. We haven't even got this booking in the diary. If you were to map the next process to send the calendar invite, if the client responds, then we send a calendar invite. 4 days before the appointment, confirm the client has accepted the invite. Now, all of this information is in your head, and that's great, but your business can only run if you're there, if it's all in your head. If we then plotted that out using the monkeys, we have, if the inquiry responds, then the next action is send the calendar invite. And when does the monkey need feeding? Well, we'll reconfirm that appointment 1 day before the appointment. Finally, it ends up with the next action is sending an invoice. And again, we ask who owns the monkey, because different people can own this monkey throughout the lifetime of the project. I know a lot of people want to know how to use, this does seem like a big jump, but it's not. A lot of people want to know how to use Capsule to manage things. And Capsule does have tracks set up, and this is an example of the appointment booking that we've just looked at. But where Capsule falls over, and this isn't a criticism, it doesn't work with if this then that, because you've got email 3 appointment choices, and that's due 1 day after the track starts. And if the client responds, then you send the calendar invite. But then you need to allow for if there's no response. And that's where if this then that falls over in Capsule, which is why sometimes people really struggle with the tracks to use them to define a process. If I actually skip on over to Capsule, if we were to use the appointment booking track and add it to a prospect, so let's say Douglas Lee. So we would add that as a case. Book appointment, you'd put any description in here. I haven't got any tags set up, and you'd select the the track book appointment, and you can then assign this track to somebody, and if you had more people in the organisation you'd have a selection there, and then you save. And this is what it looks like. So you've only got the ability to tick off a task when it's done, which is fine. There's nothing drastically wrong with that, but it's why sometimes people find it difficult, because you have to always plot +3 days, +0 days, +3 days, because otherwise it won't show up in your tasks. So then once that's completed, the next task would show if the client responds, send a calendar invite. And if we completed that, if there's no response, send the follow-up email. And so the tasks would just keep flowing through as and when they're due. In contrast, and there is no right or wrong way for this, it's just to show how the same process can look in different applications, and why plotting the process from the very beginning means that you can start to look at different pieces of software and set them up according to your process to see if they work, rather than going into the software and thinking, yay, this is brilliant, I love this bit, and then it never really works because all you're doing is playing with all the shiny bells and whistles. So this is Asana, and it's a project management system. You can set it up to manage processes, and this one is set up as a Trello board might look. We've got the appointment choices and the send the follow-up email, send a second follow-up email. So we've got the titles across the top, and then let's say Anne has delegated this to me and said, I want you to set up an appointment with Dominic Aldis. All she needs to do is put Dominic's name in and add the Capsule link, and that would take me straight back to Capsule, for example. And then I've got all of Dominic's information there. So when I've made the appointment with, or sent the first email to Dominic, I can just move his card over. And I can change the due date to tomorrow, or +3 days if we stick with the system. And I can also reassign it to Frank, because actually on Friday I'm not going to be here. And that's where Asana is easier, because you can boomerang tasks around the organisation.
So this is an either or, is it, Louise? It's either Capsule or Asana, not both.
Exactly. But the key to all of this is, if you write down every single part of the process and then start working it into the software, you can see which one's going to work best for you.
Yeah. And
sometimes that can be purely visual. For example, if you were to set up client onboarding, then you would have the administration, the finance, the time tracking, the scheduling, the weekly calls, and setting up a client workspace. Then each of these clients, Dominic, would move to the next process. I would reassign it to Frank to complete tomorrow, to do the 0 part, for example. And that's what it would look like, exactly the same information, but shown as a list. And that's more how Capsule would work, but it's still the same information. And you could go back to Capsule, and if I show you a client onboarding track, so taking you from lead received, these are in theory all of the steps involved. So contact an organisation entered into CRM, initial inquiry email sent, questionnaire received, and so it goes through, taking them right up to scheduling the weekly calls and adding to diary. So it's all the same information, it's just displayed differently, and it depends how you want to use your CRM, for example, or whether you would prefer to manage this type of information as a project. Does that kind of make sense?
Thundering silence.
I know, it's
a lot to take in, I think, just looking at it, but it's very, I like that Trello base, and I suppose probably some of it maybe is also how you work as a person, and perhaps that visual appeal, do you think, as well, Louise? Is that sort of part of that decision?
it can be. I mean, I really don't like the list view. It just leaves me cold, to be perfectly honest.
A bit scary, isn't it? That the Trello thing looks nicer because it's more white space and it feels more open, whereas the list view, it can be a bit quite daunting, can't it, looking at it like that?
It can be. I mean, Asana really is designed to manage projects. So if I show you a project, this is taking a project from receiving the purchase order from a client, or however your project might look. This is to deliver a bespoke product, a handmade product. So we would send the quote to the client, we would receive the order, we'd create the financial document, so the purchase order and the invoice. We'd send it to the project manager for approval, and so it would go on all the way through until the product is delivered to the client. And as you can see here, the greyed out items are those that have been completed, and this is the next task that needs to be actioned. But again, it's still plotting the process. The process is at the top, and then the individual steps are underneath.
So the process is at the top. Would that be your list view? Is that where you start from?
Yeah, so if I show you a list, this is a slightly different project. This is to deliver a design project. This would show you all the tasks. So these are the individual tasks that have been completed, and these are the tasks that are yet to be completed. But it's exactly the same. You've got the processes are the subject headings, if you like, and then underneath are the individual steps.
Right.
Now, where this kind of gets a bit clever, and this is where your CRM can't help you, but Asana can. You can create, let's say, a learning library. So you can create a project in itself that tells people in your organisation how to create a quote. And then you can add a video, or how to set up a Gmail canned response. So they've got their learning library that they can always refer to for your processes, your individual processes, that it's all the stuff that you keep in your head. And that when you delegate something to someone who's new to your organisation, that's the thing, well, how do you create your purchase orders? Do you use the reference field? Do you add the project number? And you can put all of that in a 2-minute video, and they don't ever need to talk to you. It's wonderful. Or you could have that information in here. So this is the list view. We've got the process at the top, and within that process, you can attach a how-to video.
Right.
So they don't have to always go back to the learning library. You can simply create the project here and attach the learnings. But it's the process that drives all of this. It's the process that will help you set up your tracks, so that when you have a new brief, you can easily click on a client, add a case, new brief, except it's not in. See, this is where I don't like Capsule, because you can't have tracks associated with opportunities and with cases.
Oh.
Yeah, oh, exactly. It's very annoying.
That's odd, isn't it? That they didn't take that into account when they built the thing. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
So when if a client or a prospect sends you a brief, you've got to go through this process of setting up when you think it might close. So we're going to select the brief received track, save it. And then these are the process steps involved in that. So you receive the brief, you create the quote, then you send the quote to the client, you confirm if the client's happy to proceed. If the client's happy, create a case. If the client declines, close the opportunity.
So can you do that in the other one?
In Asana?
In the Asana.
Yeah, the difference is that, and this is why I wanted to show you the difference between really a project management system and a CRM.
Mm.
The project management is really the equivalent of an old-fashioned filing drawer with different folders in. But your CRM will hold all of the information against a client or a named person. And you can link it to your Google Mail, and I think it links to other emails. So you can always copy an outgoing email to Capsule. You won't ever see the incoming email, but you can see the outgoing email. So you can see a certain amount of correspondence between you and Dominic.
Yes.
But you can't link your project management system to your CRM. It just doesn't hold names and addresses. It's purely for projects and tasks.
So you really need both.
You do need both. And they do have different purposes. But some people really struggle with setting up these tracks, which is why you can use a project management system to manage that. So, for example, you'd add a task.
What is that noise?
I have no idea. Not me.
I can't hear any noise.
Sounds like
What's it like?
isn't it?
Sounds like a Hoover. So, if you wanted to mix and match, if you found Capsule tasks too tedious to set up, then you could, for example, add a task in Capsule, assign it project admin, and then assign it to a person and save it. And I would then receive a task saying to set up an appointment, at which point I would then go over to Asana and start the process over here. There's swings and roundabouts with all of it, to be honest. I think, as Berenice said, a lot of it comes down to how you like to view information. This gives you a really useful bird's eye view of all of the clients are currently being onboarded and where they are in the process.
I tell you what it does do, and that is in terms of time management, it's a really, really good example of why things always take longer than people think they're going to.
They do always take longer. Yeah.
And, you say set up an appointment with someone, that seems like one thing. And it just isn't, is it? Ever?
No, it really isn't ever just one thing. As I was plotting through the steps involved, it's just ridiculous. And if you've got a whole project to manage and there are, a lot of steps involved, or, a more complicated process, it's why people do struggle.
Yeah.
To say this would be the point I would be hiring someone else to do this for me. I'm just looking at it going, no. I'd rather never expand and keep it all in my head. I'm not this way inclined, but I can see its value and I could probably be persuaded into using it, but setting it all up and doing it,
no, there's nothing creative in it.
No.
It is purely process driven, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it makes the creative feel more organised. I have to say, I use Trello a lot, and I was interested in seeing what Asana looks like, because I haven't really looked at it, but so many people rave and say how good it is, and actually it is more attractive. It's nicer than Trello. I like it, and I can see it being really useful to me. But yeah, the whole kind of setting it up and things, but then there's a degree of me with, same as you, Charlotte, if it's in my head, then that's okay. I do like the way this looks. It's really nice, actually, Asana. I like it.
Well, the bonus with Asana is the ability to so easily boomerang tasks around.
Yeah.
You can have a look at your task list, and your tasks are shown in a horrifying list here. And so all you need to do is click on them and see it's client onboarding. Okay, that's what I need to do. And then you click through. But if you think, no, I can't deal with any of this today, I know, Frank, let's give it to Frank. He loves doing stuff. And that's it. It's gone.
Yeah.
And it will then appear on Frank's task list for today.
Poor Frank.
I know. But that's the bonus with Asana, is you can so easily boomerang tasks. But you can do the same in Capsule. You just reassign the task to somebody else, and then it bounces over to them.
But I guess that only works if you've got someone else to assign it to. If it's just assigning it to yourself, then yeah.
So the other way, if it is always only ever going to be you, then in a way mapping processes is not necessary.
I mean, you say that, Louise, and I agree with you. But I suppose the scientist in me, the data person, says, yeah, but it would be really useful to, as Anne said, to map out those tasks so that, I guess, from a time perspective, you can see where you get lost and whether you can improve the process and make it more effective. I can definitely, even if I never expand, and that actually isn't necessarily true. I just need to bring Rich on board. He's my other half. He is much more process driven than I am. Get him to do it.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. You see, where Asana is helpful, just to appeal to your scientist nature, this is the free version, so there's only 3 things I can add to the dashboard. The dashboard will give you a top level view of what's going on with any project. So a project, as opposed to an appointment scheduling system, using it to schedule appointments, that's really just as a task management board. But for a project, you can set the status of the project and give it a green light. And if you always set a project due date, I know I badger on about due dates, but if you don't know when something's due, you've got no idea how you're doing with it. And from this, you can export all of the project information to Google Sheets.
That does appeal. You're right.
I thought it might.
See, that I can see that working for the 12-week year, actually, that you put your projects in and it would automatically give you this.
Yeah.
That would be nice. I mean, I have a Google sheet that I'm essentially updating myself, but
but it will show you incomplete tasks by project. So it gives you some nice pictures, but then you can drill down to see what the name of the project is, which team owns the project, the due date of the project, and then what the current status is. So that can be quite useful too.
All looks a bit horrifying if you're not used to this kind of stuff, but if anybody wants to grow a business where they're going to go away for a fortnight's holiday and they expect other people to get on with stuff, it's absolutely necessary, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Unless you're prepared just to shut the business down and and not be in touch with people for a fortnight, then it's
You have to do it, and so much software works on an if this then that basis that it's really useful to just have it in the back of your mind all the time when you're trying to make a piece of software or decide if a piece of software is going to work for you. I always talk about creating the foundations. That's what it is. It's if this then that. So if I receive an email from a client, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to add the information to my CRM? Do I want it to update automatically? So if this email arrives, then my CRM will update automatically, or then my Google Sheet will update automatically, whatever it may be. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Lovely. This is a piece of software called PySync, and I won't go into too much detail except to say it syncs your contacts across multiple applications. It does that exactly as you can see here using if this then that. So if a contact is in Salesforce and it's owned by security user, then sync the contacts between Google Contacts and Salesforce. And so it goes on. But it's all about mapping your processes to get to the solution that you want. And if you can use the if this then that, whenever you're trying to work something out, it will make choosing your software so much easier.
Okay, so the tasks that you've shown us, Louise, very simple one, setting up an appointment, and then bringing a new client on board. Are they the ones that you generally help people with the most? Are they, or is it does it depend on the business?
A lot of it depends on the business. Mostly I will be looking at all of the administrative processes.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get an idea of where most people would start, getting into this kind of way of thinking.
Well, I mean, a really, really simple one is you receive an email and it asks you to send a brochure, or perhaps there's a set piece of information that you email out a lot. In Google Mail, and you can do it in Outlook and lots of others, you can set up canned responses, pressing all the wrong buttons. There we go, appointment dates. So that's automatically populated, and I haven't had to top and tail it. All I've got to do now is just look in my calendar and populate that information.
Yeah.
Nice.
There are lots of things that you will do on a daily basis. A brochure request. You can download our brochure here, and that saves you several minutes typing. It's not much, but it does all add up, and I just don't see the point in doing things needlessly.
No, I think anything that's repeated, like this kind of thing, the sooner you can automate it, the better, however small your business is.
Yeah. And, this stuff can be completely automated if you wanted to, using Zapier. But, if you're not ready to take that step, then these canned responses are great. In Outlook, they're called quick parts.
Quick parts.
I've used them in Outlook. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where I would start, is just looking at the small wins.
Yeah, so anything that you repeat, with a standard response or something like that, start there and get those automated, and then look at making lists of actions, the if this then that stuff, and then look at which piece of software is most appropriate for handling that.
Yeah, exactly. And you can then take this one step further. So Capsule has a Dropbox. So if I copy that Dropbox link and I send a brochure to somebody, and then I BCC, and you can set this up to automatically always BCC Dropbox, what will happen is that will then get added automatically to your CRM. That email will automatically go in to that person's contact. And if the contact doesn't exist, it will be created. And then you'll get a note down here to say, check the contact, and then you can put a due date on it to follow up with them.
Okay, that sounds really good. It's obviously not the sort of thing that most people get excited about. Like you said at the beginning, it's not a sexy part of running a business, but it does make things a lot easier, and lets people get on with the stuff that they really are good at.
Yeah, it does. And the thing is, it does mean that even just those two small things, if you went on holiday, you could have someone just managing your inquiries. Because you've got your canned response set up, and you've got the lead coming into Capsule, so they can check that there's a task assigned to that, and that task will be waiting for you when you get home from holiday, and you can follow up with whoever it was that requested a brochure.
Yeah, that's great. So you don't need to keep checking everything.
No.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Louise.
That's my pleasure. Is there anything that you would like to ask? I know that sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't have to be about anything I've talked about.
No, but I do need to go away and reflect on that. I didn't know you could do canned responses in Google, so that is a big thing for me. A lot of my CV emails, people make the same mistakes, and it takes me ages. I cut and paste, but actually I could just do it as a canned response. That's brilliant. And just getting, hiring a VA is something that's on my list of things to do. And so I would need to be able to explain to them the process anyway. So for me to even go away and think about it will be beneficial, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're briefing a VA, you don't need to go down to the nth degree as I have. If you tell them what your expectations are and how you like to treat a client, if they're bright enough, they'll work it out. For example, I would chase suppliers every day because they deserve it. But a client, I wouldn't, and I'd be much kinder in my approach to chasing them.
Yeah. No, it's been really useful. Thank you.
Finally, I'd like to have a quick look at getting things done. Getting things done is all about the process and works on an if this then that scenario. David Allen, who was the author of the book Getting Things Done, created the flowchart on the right hand side here. But I think it's easier to understand if one applies if this then that to each part of the process. So for example, stuff comes into your life, whether it's business or personal, and the first thing you ask is if this stuff is actionable. Then, will it take less than 2 minutes to complete? If the answer is yes, then do it. If the answer is no, then delegate or defer it. Those 6 boxes on the left-hand side summarise the whole of that flowchart minus the 3 boxes at the bottom. And it's that level of simplicity with if this then that makes it far easier for you to capture your actions using the Getting Things Done process, for example, and then decide which software will work best for your business. And that software can be project management, CRM, anything that actually works on an if this then that basis. In summary, process mapping gets you organised. It gets your business organised, and it keeps you on top of the information flow. Process mapping also makes delegating and outsourcing a breeze, which means your business will continue to run if you're not there. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't cover in the Zoom session, and if there's anything specific to your business that you'd like to ask a question about, then please do get in touch. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye for now.